Back to Morning Shots, and I actually have a very special treat with me today, and that is Rob Hersov, South Africa's very well famous billionaire. I think you're a billionaire. But anyway, Rob is very famous for basically calling the ANC the P word over and over and over again. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks, Byron. Welcome. Great to be on Morning Shot, by the way. I'm in Dubai at the moment, so I hope that sound and video is okay. And on the billionaire thing, it does depend on the currency. So rand, I'm definitely there, but I'm not yet on dollars. We're working on it.
Well, I as last I checked, I'm actually a billionaire too, Rob. It's a billionaire in Zimbabwean dollars. So, we're one in the same.
Yep.
We're two billionaires talking to each other.
How much do you need anyway in life? How much do you need?
Oh, exactly. Now, I'm actually going to ask you a question, right? So a lot of people obviously have heard of you in the media. You get a bit of exposure in the media. You've now got your own YouTube channel. So for those of you guys who have never heard of Rob or you like the things that Rob says, go check out his YouTube channel. He's actually putting out content himself. So there's your free plug all the way at the start of the show. But tell me a little bit about you. Were you born in South Africa? Did you live here your whole life? Have you been abroad? What's the story?
Yeah. So I was born in 1960 in Johannesburg, and I was born into a very wealthy family. My grandfather founded Anglo-Vile, and for the older members of your audience, click subscribe, do all that good stuff for Byron. Anglo-Vile was a very large mining industrial company that my grandfather founded, and then my father and my grandfather's partner sons took over, and I was the third generation. So I did the Ridge, Michael House, UCT, 2 years in the army, infantry officer. And then in 1985, having finished the army, I left the country to see the world, or see what I can do. And I did, Goldman Sachs, New York, Harvard Business School. And then I worked as Rupert Murdoch's right-hand man in New York, which is a whole story and an episode on its own. And then I was pulled away by Johan Rupert at Richemont, and I joined the main board of Richemont for many years and helped Johan build a very successful media business across Europe. And I ended up in Milan as chief executive of Telepiù, which is the kind of DSTV of Italy, me living in Milan. And as part of that life, I was the first foreigner to buy a football team in Italy. This was maybe a story no one knows, but I bought Vicenza Calcio, Lanerossi Vicenza, that Paolo Rossi played for. It wasn't in bankruptcy, but the parent company was, and a friend and I bought it and owned a football team for 2 years and then sold it on at a profit. I didn't even follow football. I'm a rugby fan. And then I became an entrepreneur, and I've had failure and success, been in the private jet business. I've been in aviation, technology, sport, finance. And in 2017, I came back to South Africa after 31 years overseas with my New Zealand wife and 2 of our 4 children, the other 2 older and at university at the time, and came back. And I came back really, it was only for 2-3 years, because I said to my wife, this is the last of South Africa. Under Zoom, it's finished. It will collapse. And, we're going to come back 2-3 years, enjoy this magnificent country, show our kids a bit of my heritage, but I'm not going to invest. I'm not going to put my head above the parapet. I'm not going to speak out, because this country's finished. I mean, Zoom is destroying it, and here I am 7-8 years later, and I'm not leaving. And I've done everything I said I wouldn't do. So I have invested. I've definitely put my head above the parapet and spoken my mind, and here I am. I love it, and I'm going to fight for this country. But I'm pretty negative about where South Africa is today.
So let's start off with a logical question on that front, and that is, are your kids still in South Africa, or have they immigrated? You don't have to tell me where. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I've got a 28-year-old in Miami, and he's building a paddle business. I've got a 25-year-old in London. He's in the tech business. I'm telling him, get out of Europe, go to America. Europe finished. And then I've got a 13-year-old daughter, 10-year-old son here in South Africa. I'm fifth generation on my mother's side, 4th generation on my father's side, South African. I am a Safa.
So I can trace my family back to 1725. 1725, my family's been in this country, and that's on both sides.
As
So I'm
shepherds, was that the shepherd, or what are the other last names?
there's tons of them. So Sadler, Ardent. So the actual Ardent family came from Prussia. The Sadler family came from England, and then the Shepherd family came from Northern Ireland. So I've got Prussia and then basically the United Kingdom.
Yeah, so I've got Eastern Europe as well, the Russia, Eastern Europe on my father's side, and then England, Scotland on my mother's side. So that's kind of where it all happened. So we're all mongrels in some way.
It's very interesting to actually trace your lineage in South Africa. If you're actually a settler, if you're a descendant of settlers, these days that has such a slur to it, doesn't it? You say settler, and it's like it's a slur. But if you're a descendant of one, it's very interesting to see the historical narrative and how that's split up. So, a good example is in my family, I've got the Ardents and the Kirks, and they're actually, as I said, they're all from Prussia, but they were actually all Jewish. And they left that area due to obviously Jewish persecution and the expropriation of their property without compensation. And I always find that kind of like highly ironic, because now here we are in 2025. And as you know, one of the big problems that we were wrestling with is EWC, expropriation without compensation. And a very similar story can be said for the Shepherd and the Sadler family, because what a lot of people don't know is that around 17, because people don't really study history these days, right? But around the 17th century, there was a lot of land confiscation with the monarch going on, the stewards that they didn't really want to be around there. So there was a lot of land confiscation going on with, the Highlands and so forth. And a lot of people ended up leaving because of those reasons. So it's ironic that I've got two sections of family that have basically had their property expropriated without compensation, confiscated, if you will, due to political reasons. And here we are, 2025. And what's one of the biggest topics on the table? Expropriation without compensation, right? So life is ironic, but it's interesting to get those stories or that perspective when you actually do your cultural analysis, especially if you are descendants of settlers.
But if we are settlers, and some Afrikaans families have been here for 13 generations, then the Zulus and Xhosas and the other tribes are settlers too, because they came from further north up Africa. So they have, they're as much settlers as we are. So we should just put that ridiculous conversation aside.
Yeah, Rob, but they're from Africa, and you're not from Africa. You're from Europe, and because they're all from the same continent.
That's such
yes,
bollocks.
They know it's virtually the equivalent distance of London to Tokyo, but they're all on the same continent, my friend. Therefore, they're entitled to it. Just like anybody who lives in Europe is entitled to, I don't know, China, because it's all on the same landmass, right?
Bullshit narrative. Sorry, are we allowed to swear?
It is bullshit. It is, and unfortunately, you'll know that I have a second channel called Retard Dunistan, and the whole basis of that is basically that the politics in South Africa is just mentally retarded.
I'm glad you said that, because I just published an article in Visegrad 24. Stephen Thompson said, "Can you do an op-ed article?" I was like, my normal stuff. I feel like doing something a little bit wild and radical. And I've published an article which went out yesterday called "Leftism is Mental Illness." So if you believe in the more than two genders, if you believe in net zero, if you believe in radical feminism, you really have a mental health disorder. To be a leftist, you've got to have some form of mental health disorder, in my view.
And I would tend to agree with you on that front. It's ironic that for most of human history, you've never had to ask any individual ever in all of all time, what is a woman? But in the year 2023, 2024, not so much now. Trump has changed the narrative, right? But in those years, just like, what is a woman? I don't know. Okay, so you're fighting for women's rights. Yes, but what is a woman? Oh, that we can't discuss that. Okay, so you want equal pay, right? Gender equal pay. Women don't get equal pay. Cool. What's a woman? Oh, not talking about that.
And then we have a ministry for women. what the hell does the Ministry for Women do? I mean, it's just a bunch of idiots
know.
turning up to do nothing.
Well, what is a woman? It's a ministry of what? Look, it's, a woman is anybody who identifies as a woman. So, no, whatever.
Whatever.
I mean, that's actually one of the things I like about Milei, right? So when Milei actually took office, he went straight in there and he was like, why not? He was like, cut everything. So all those
they had a
industries
ministry,
gone.
but he chopped that. And I loved it when he had the whiteboard with all the stickies on it, all the ministries. He went, this gone, this gone. And, we have 34 ministers, 32. And we have 43 deputy ministers. So that's 75 ministers, let alone the DGs. And all of them get to travel first class, get blue lights, they get, security at their houses. I mean, the amount of waste in this country is second to none. We need a DOGE, the Department of Gaten Efficiency.
Government efficiency.
He's our Milei. Gaten efficiency. Because Gaten McKenzie is our Milei. We need to get him into power, in my view.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about your perspective on some of the political leaders in a minute. So at the moment, obviously, you did this whole thing a couple of years ago. You may recall you issued basically a YouTube clip that basically says, "I'm stepping away from politics and I'm going to spend some time with my family." So what happened to that?
Well, I had reached a point where it was putting a huge amount of stress on the family. And, it says limited upside for me and unlimited downside. I don't get invited to golf tournaments anymore. I have corporate leaders who I considered friends who kind of see me and avoid me, don't take my call. I've been deplatformed so many times. I kind of know the call when it's come out. It's like, Rob, about the speech tomorrow night. And then, I know it's good. They know it's good. Bishop's old boys deplatformed me, ever as example. And then I've been picked out of, a fund that I helped raise, $220 million Africa Technology Fund. The DFIs, leftist DFIs, Swed Fund, Nor Fund, CDC of England, and even the American one under Biden said he's too political. We're not putting any money in this if he gets any economics. I had to walk away from a massive business that I launched. And, the other businesses are, my poor partners are kind of very nervous about having me in there. So it's been a huge amount of downside. And the only upside is, I feel like I'm moving the needle, moving the narrative. So it's why am I doing it? I remind myself. So I quit. I basically said, this is it, because I felt as my poor wife and kids, there was too much stress. So my daughter came home one day, scared and not knowing why she was scared, because some other parent had said in her earshot, it's amazing. Inara's daddy hasn't been knocked off yet. It's not a nice thing for a kid to hear. And they don't know why.
No, but in fairness to the parents, like they had a point, right?
Yeah, but I mean, in reality, I'm still here. So I had promised to do a speech 4 months later, and I don't want to let people down. So I said to my wife, right, I'm out, but I'm going to just do this last speech. Well, here I am back again. But I have her support
lied,
now.
Basically.
Well, no, I took a sabbatical. How about that? But the problem is, I do think, I was, you're one of the pioneers for sure, calling out the government from truth to power. And, I think I was probably one of the first to say Futsak ANC publicly when people were like, you can't, Bridget Fudebi said, you can't say that. It's the ANC. It's disrespectful. And I said, well, I think what the ANC has done to the country in the last 30 years is disrespectful. And now more and more people are saying Futsak ANC, using my word, clowns, criminals, and morons. A lot of people are using clowns, criminals, morons, calling Cyril spineless. And I like to say I pioneered all of it. So I've been the dam buster. I wouldn't say it's bust, but it's cracked, along with you and other extraordinary people who've been brave enough to call it out. And I'd hoped more people, particularly, influential people in South Africa would be doing the same. But not enough are. So I'll try and keep the narrative going. But, we are at a crunch point today. We really are. I mean, America, and if we can jump into this topic straight away, and America is coming in swinging, and they are pissed off. South Africa's flown too close to the sun for too long, and we're going to get fried. America's had enough of giving us money, giving us support, being nice to us, and then South Africa voting against the US in every chance they have, being a proxy for Iran, kissing ass to Russia and China, and treating America and the West like shit. And America's had enough. They're coming in swinging. This is 1985 all over again. There's a decision to be made. And I can tell you right now, the ANC government, forget the GNU, the ANC government will make the wrong decision.
I have absolutely no doubt.
No doubt, 100% sure. They'll make the wrong decision. They will tell America to stuff off, and Sodom and Gomorrah will be rained upon this country. And the great pity is that the pain and heartache that's going to happen for business, the man and woman in the street, employed people, is going to be horrendous. And what America should be doing, and I hope they're listening, is they should target politicians, particularly ANC ones, even retired ones like Lady Pandor, put them on the terrorist list, freeze their bank accounts, freeze their ability to travel, and smash them, but preferably try not to, nuke our poor economy. They should pick on the politicians and smack. Because those fat cats, they don't know what's coming when America turns the beef up. And maybe in 5 years' time, South Africa will fall on the knee and beg for help from America. But they're going to make a huge own goal coming.
Yeah, look, I think it's always a difficult one, right? And it's one of those things that you can get so terribly wrong talking about online, because people will be very happy to twist the type of things that you say, or kind of like your ideas on these things. But if I may say it, right, if you think about it, logic, a lot of these people, they, with no one, so I want to make sure I get this right. A lot of these people in government now wouldn't make the decisions that the apartheid government made. Right. A lot of the people in the apartheid regime, when they had a lot of pressure applied to them and the government was under strain, at some point they had to sit back and go, right, okay, I want to do what's right for the country, and I don't want there to be a civil war, and I don't want there to be strife and what. We're getting smashed by foreign entities, so I have to take an interest, a decision in the best interest of the country. And that is, to a large degree, what the politicians at the time did. Now, you may have issues with that, regardless of if you're white or you're black or whoever. You may have an issue and say, wow, we would have liked it to have a more extreme position. If you speak to some white Afrikaners, they say, well, why didn't we have armed resistance? And if you speak to some black individuals, they'll say, why didn't we have armed resistance and just go in there and kill all the white people off? Like there's extremists on both sides, but the apartheid government took a position that they considered to be in the best interest of the country. Would our current politicians take the exact same approach now if they were in that position? And the answer is no. They would be more than happy to say, okay, well, we're not going to be bullied. We'll watch the country go up in flames. We don't care if we get sanctioned up the wazoos, if the people's economic lives aren't that good. We don't care about those things. What we care about is basically getting our own way. And it's a little bit like, if I can't have you, no one can. It's not like, okay, I can't have you, so I'll wish you well with your new boyfriend, right? So it's like,
Byron, you're so right.
I can't have you, no one.
You're so right. You're so right. The Nats at 85 made a decision for the best of the country. This is unsustainable. The ANC government, forget the GNU, the ANC government just don't care. They don't care that people are homeless, hopeless, undereducated, unemployed, impoverished. They don't care. It's like the French Revolution, They really are prostitutes, bloodsuckers, and evil, racist ideologues. Did I get every adjective in there? They don't care. They do not care. Cyril, Gaten, Refugee, and all the nasties on the left don't care if people suffer or impoverished as long as they have their Blue Right Brigade and their money and their kids at private schools. These are evil, nasty people. They don't care. The Nats, at least, we're thinking for the country. You're absolutely right. It's malevolence plus incompetence.
Yeah, and it's like, I know what the actual the comments to that type of phrase will be. It's like, okay, are you saying the Nats were better than the ANC? Are you saying apartheid was better than now? And no, I'm not saying any of that. But what I am saying is, logically speaking, the Nats had to make a difficult choice, and the ANC have to make a difficult choice. The Nats made a decision in the best interest of the country. The ANC will make the best interest in themselves. And that is fundamentally the difference. You can try color that however you want, but the reality is, if you look at it from there's some really strange things that happens in South Africa's politics, and I've heard this from some very smart individuals, even in the MK party, about how the South African Treasury cedes all tax to the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom sends it back in something or other, because in 18 something, the UK owned this country and they own all the land, and the land is actually secretly owned. And you just think, like, where are you pulling this stuff out of? Like, you're actually a parliamentary MP. You're a very smart individual for the MK party. And yet you're basically talking about, back of the milk carton gossip type stuff that has
They're not smart.
no logical basis.
Well, Byron, they're not smart. These are people that are undereducated, indoctrinated, and bloody stupid. Sorry, you said they're smart. They're not smart. Maybe you said
Well,
they're
the
smart.
individual that I'm
So
the individual that I know is actually very smart when it comes through to certain topics. But I mean, at the same time, you go, well, how do you go from being very clued up on that topic to being this grossly indoctrinated in tabloid gossip that you actually believe it to be true? I mean, some of these things are, mate, stick it in Chat GPT if you want to be that lazy. Ask Chat GPT to fact check you if you want. Like,
so Byron,
be that lazy if you want.
The difference between the right and the left. The right is based on fact. The left is based on feelings. And so these people who do political science and other moronic degrees, they've read a couple of books, they talk the talk, but they actually don't care about facts. They don't look at history, as you said. Very few people read about history, and they don't focus on the facts. The facts prove that Judeo-Christian, Western, capitalist, democratic in the main countries, on every single metric, outperform the leftist, communist, socialist countries. Outperform on every single metric. And yet people believe socialism hasn't been tried properly. It's a mental illness. It's for stupid people.
Yeah, but don't you know, Rob? Socialism hasn't been tried properly, but I mean, it will be better next time. Just, dude.
Like, there's a pile of skulls. I saw a fantastic cartoon. There's a whole pile of skulls. And the one skull says, socialism hasn't been tried properly. And the other skull goes, fuck off.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But, at the end of the day, there's countries, and I do often suggest this to people, there's countries that were more well off with us, far bigger GDP than we had, and far more brighter individuals that have tried it. They couldn't make it work, so how the hell are we going to make it work? Like, you don't go to the dumps and the costs.
It's like NHI. We have a health system that's broken. Fix what we have. Just because they're too dumb to fix things and too inexperienced doesn't mean you launch a whole new system, which you're not competent enough to build. It'll be a disaster. So break it so we can fix it.
But then I use the dumb scenario again, right? Okay, so the United Kingdom has one of the wealthiest economies in the world. They have some of the smartest individuals, and they can poach some of the best and brightest from around the world. The United Kingdom's NHS is completely on its knees and basically it's collapsed 5 times over, and they can't make it work. So you're going to go to a country that's 1/20th of the United Kingdom with no purchasing power and some of the dunces of the world, and we're going to be successful with something that they're struggling to be successful with. That is like hubris. That's all it is. Hubris, the sheer hubris of, this idea that somehow this superiority complex of, well, I wished it to be so, therefore it is. It's just daft.
But you know what? It's the conversation we're having is the conversation everyone has around the braai. Everyone. Argentina, we have a live experiment, case study, live, happening by the day, of Javier Milei, after 100 years of socialism destroying Argentina, comes in as a libertarian, free market, and is making the changes that are happening instantaneous. Now, I had a WhatsApp back and forward with Enoch Gonaguana, our finance minister, who I actually get on well with. I like her. And I said to him, are you watching Argentina? And he said, yes, I am. Now, he can see where we are with South Africa and where Argentina was and what's happening in Argentina. He can see it. But is he courageous enough, brave enough to stand up and say to everyone else in the ANC, this is not working here in South Africa, guys. Come on, let's get around a table. It's not working. We need to try another route. It's not more government, more socialism. Why don't we go free market? Why doesn't Cyril grow a spine for once in his life, or cojones, which he clearly never had, and say, guys, I may not be president forever, but I've made a decision, 1985, that this is not working. We got to go in another way, another direction. And like Sweden did in 1992, like Russia did under Gorbachev, it's not working, let's go the other way. I don't see a single person in the ANC that has intellectual courage to do it.
Never going to happen, because at the end of the day, and I know you understand that as well as I do. The biggest problem that Cyril has right now is actually the Tripartite alliance, because look at what's happened already. They've sided with all they did is they jumped in bed with the DA. When I say jumped in bed, the DA forms part of the GNU. Look at the attacks from the SACP and COSATU against the ANC directly. Look at the way that they have vilified their own people. Now, what will they then do? Will they break apart the Tripartite Alliance? Because if they broke apart the Tripartite Alliance, they could theoretically get to a point where they could potentially sit back and say, okay, well, now we're going to go full free market, we're going to go full reform. But the problem is, as Cyril has said himself, he would never break apart the alliance, because he feels that that's what the ANC was, that he inherited from Nelson Mandela is, and he doesn't want to break apart this legacy of Mandela, this tripartite, right? But now the difficulty comes in that whilst the ANC is a broad church, COSATU and the SACP are both leeches. They don't bring anything to the table. They extract. And the leadership in those positions are basically, there's spastic, and then there's like completely retarded, and then there's the leadership of the SACP. You understand? So these guys aren't what I'd call the best and brightest of any of the bunch. But the difficulty now becomes, okay, do they have a constituency? Could they potentially do damage to the ANC? My personal opinion is no. I don't think anybody even gives a damn about them. But for some reason, there are members of the ANC that still think way back when that the SACP was something great, and they need to placate them. So as a result, as a leader, you've got to deal with internal conflict and actually splitting your own alliance apart. And Cyril doesn't, I won't say he doesn't have the kahunas for it. He has the, I don't give a damn, and I can't be bothered with the hassle. I don't want the conflict. That's actually what he has. He doesn't want to deal with the conflict.
So here, let's play this forward. Okay. I agree with you, by the way. He's isolated and he just couldn't be bothered. So let's play this forward to 2029. Skip 2027 municipals. February, not 2026. February 2027. You heard it here first. let's go to 2029. The ANC will have shredded COSATU and the unions by then and will be under 30%. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt of being 30%. This kind of centrist, whatever's left of the ANC. Yeah. They're 30%, MK is 30%, or MK and what's left of the EFF. Okay.
I don't
And
think
then
there'll
you
be
have,
anything left. But anyway, let's continue.
well, play with it. Okay. They're 30%. And then you will have, in my belief, our first ever center-right party, which will be made up of the Patriotic Alliance, which is growing massively in popularity, a big chunk of what's the DA, because it's being annihilated, the FF Plus will have rolled in, and parts of Inkatha. This will be our first center-right party. And I believe it'll be what we desperately need. And they'll be at 20%, but they'll be the kingmakers. And I think that's where we're going to be. That's where we're going to be in 2029. Well, the change is going to come. But between now and then, we've got 4.5 years, where we would have been going sideways. But this crisis has been precipitated by America. We now have an opportunity. Never waste a good crisis, because America is now coming in swinging. They're pissed off. And this is going to, the Rand could go to 50. The Rand could go to 50. If America comes in swing, cancels AGOA, tariffs, pulls all support, sanctions, pulling businesses out of South Africa, chases us temporarily into the arms of China. Okay. This will precipitate a crisis.
We'll explore that conversation.
Which may accelerate the positive change in South Africa earlier than 2029. Because we got.
I don't see it.
We could have a collapse coming pretty quickly.
Yeah, but I don't see the change happening. I mean, you think about it. Okay, there's 146 racial laws on the books, right? What's the chances that the ANC changes that? Or fuck all? And the reason for that is sorry?
They won't. No, I agree with you. The pressure from America, they just don't care as long as they've got their own money. No. But I think you're right. Nothing will happen immediately other than the economy being smacked so hard in the stomach, which is coming.
Yeah. I think that the time that things will change, and I think, this is something that I think the DA is absolutely shockingly appalling at, and that's actually controlling a narrative. They have zero concept on how to control the narrative. And there's loads of reasons for that. But the biggest problem that they've got here is that the economy, I think, will take a shredding. I think that it's highly likely that the Black individual is going to be more affected than the white individual, and they're going to want to have answers. And I think the ANC are going to, rather than take responsibility or even highlight that their role in this, they're going to say, well, it was Western forces, and it's racism, and it's colonialism, and it's all the usual buzzwords. It's the legacy of apartheid and something. It wasn't us. It was, those evil white people. Because, again, the white people probably aren't actually going to be affected as much by it as the Black individuals. So I can see that happening.
But those excuses run thin. They run thin. You can't be, crying wolf.
Still works in Zim.
Well, does
Still
it?
works in Moz.
Does it? They never had an opposition. They didn't have a country that had 26 languages, 20, 30 different tribes. The difference between Mpumalanga and Cape Town is you might as well be on another planet. Whereas Zim was, a small group of whites, 2 black parties, and the one killed off the other. Bon. South Africa, you tell me the one dominant group in South Africa. There isn't. Or one or two groups could do a coup. No, the Zulus are KZN and a little bit of Gaten. There's not a single Zulu in the Free State, the Cape, Eastern Cape. I mean, when the riots happen,
I employ some in PE, but I know there's a couple down here because I employ them. So I know there's a couple.
But you know what I mean? They're irrelevant in the Cape and the Northwest and places like that. So they're not dominant. And they caused, the KZN issues happened. Let's call it the Zulu uprising, but I mean, that's a bit unfair. But the KZN riots happened and didn't spread. And they were subdued. not by the police and army,
Yeah.
mind you.
No, by the taxi industry, and we called it at the time.
Oh,
But
and,
actually, I gotta go back. I gotta roll back, and I've been meaning to ask you this since you mentioned it. But you talked about the Judeo-Christian West, and you actually wrote an article in which, or you did a video on your YouTube channel in which you basically said that Jews and Muslims in South Africa should just kind of get along for the better of the country and stop fighting about topics that impact the country. Well, guys, I watched the video, but I'm going to ask you, and I think other people are also going to be curious. Are you religious? Are you Christian? Are you Jewish? I think probably assume you are Jewish. I know you're not, but I'll let you talk to yourself.
I've got a Jewish heritage on my father's side way back, but I'm not Jewish. My mother's not Jewish. I wasn't brought up Jewish. I have an affinity. I stand with Israel, but I have affinity. I think they're a pretty impressive tribe. I went to Michael House, Anglican school, love the hymns, but I'm not religious. No, I really am not. I'm, practice Stoicism. Pretty open-minded about God. I think God is within you. God is love. It's not this external dude in a cloud that invented everything. I think that's pretty weird. And I think religion in general is tyrannical, but some religions are more tyrannical than others. How's that for a description?
I personally, I don't consider myself to be a racist in the slightest. Although I know many of my audience, especially on the far left, would be like, no, that's not true. You're white, therefore you're automatically racist. Doesn't matter what I say. But I am a culturalist in that I do believe in cultural supremacy. And I do believe that Western culture is more supreme than some other cultures purely by the results of the outcomes of what it's managed to achieve. In other words, electricity and cars, and that's just.
I agree with you. I think you're 100%. Some cultures are better than other cultures, and I think the Judeo-Christian culture, if such a thing exists, just by facts alone, is vastly better than any other cultures. Vastly, I agree.
As a simple thing, and I know that I'll get refuting people and go, oh, that's racist. But actually, let's use a very simple example. Okay, so an example might be that the biblical commandments of an eye for an eye. Okay, so an eye for an eye actually translates in the legal system as being proportional justice. And what that actually translates into is that if I break your arm, Rob, you can't ask me to kill my family, soak my ground, and rape my wife because I broke your arm, right? It has to be proportionate, eye for an eye, right? But if you look at Roman culture didn't have that idea of proportionality. So if you broke my arm, I could rape your wife, I could salt your earth, and I could kill your dog and make sure that your family name was blotted out from the sun so that it never happened again. Proportionality in terms of the outcome was never a consideration. The same thing, you see a very similar thing that occurs in the Viking culture. Viking cultures had the same thing. Now, there's no one that would listen to this and go, well, yeah, those two cultures were equivalent to, say, a Western, culture on this perspective. In which case, if you accept that premise, then you've already lost the argument. You're like me. You also believe that some cultures are more supreme than others.
Yes. Look, take cows wandering around the streets in India, shitting on them, so nobody touches them. That's a pretty horrendous, disgusting element of their culture. It's not a definition of the whole culture, but I think it's pretty awful. But you're right. Which countries do people want to go and live in? Which countries do people wish they had been born in? Well, there's a list. There's the happiness index, and it's every single one of them is Western Judeo-Christian. Every single one of the top 20. And by the way, most of the top 10 are 5 to 10 million population, one culture, one religion, one language, the kind of Swedens and Switzerlands and New Zealands. I think Australia makes it the top 10. But I agree with you 100%. I'm a culturalist too. So bang on that one.
But I think a lot of the West, though, you're talking about the homogeneity of the cultures and this idea that you have kind of like one people, one religion, one whatever. The West has very specifically Europe. I'm going to say Europe in specific, but Europe has, and I think it's through the sponsorship of the EU, and specifically the EU in terms of its, should we call it dogmatic alignment with certain organizations such as the Open Society Foundation being sponsored by the Soros type players. And if you're a conspiracy theorist, come up with all sorts of rationale as to why this may have happened. We could be here for 2 hours talking about the merits of conspiracy theories, but they have slowly, as Douglas Murray describes it, had this curious death of Europe. And they've almost committed, the European version of harakiri. They've just like committed self-suicide, where they basically said, okay, well, what we've done is we've become relativistic with cultures. All cultures are equal. All people are equal. And we're taking this Hobbesian type view where it's just education. So let's just bring them in and educate them. And that will make everything fine. And it's not fun, but it's not fun at all. It's not working.
They didn't educate them. They didn't integrate them. And look what's happened. So, let's quickly talk about America, if I may.
Of course.
I see pretty clearly where America's going. America sent messages to every diplomat and every senior member of its international community and said, you need to be, on behalf of America, bigger, stronger. You need to make America bigger, stronger, and safe. Bigger, stronger, and okay? And everything they do, domestically and internationally, is based on that. The enemy is China, Russia. Russia can be sorted like that, and it will be sorted like that. The enemy is China. And Africa will be brought to me. South Africa is the America of Africa. And South Africa is going to be taught a big lesson, though. We're going to be taught a lesson, and we will eventually bend the knee as South Africa to America, and the rest of Africa will follow. And America will carve Africa back from China's hold into America's hold. That's coming. And the lesson will be made on South Africa. America will solve that problem with Putin because, Russia's not a threat to America. China is. And Russia, get out of Ukraine. Here's a deal. Done. That's going to happen very quickly. The Middle East will be solved very, very quickly by America. And Israel will be let loose on Iran. And I reckon that's in a matter of the next 2 to 3 months. America's going to let Israel slap Iran. And you're going to see something that's never been seen before, Israel hammering Iran. And once Iran is sorted,
I completely agree.
Middle East will be set. It's only about China. It's only about China.
I mean, I agree with everything you've said there. Everything. And I think that your analysis on Iran and Israel, 100%. And it's interesting because actually, if you understand the geopolitics of the Middle East, and you're like, okay, Iran's not liked by its own neighbors. Saudi Arabia don't even like Iran, right? Iraq don't like Iran. Like Iran it's really not liked by its own neighbors. It's basically the Zimbabwe of the Middle East. Like everybody looks at it.
The ANC like
tolerated.
The ANC like
Well,
Iran.
do they? I mean, they like Iranian money, but do they actually? I mean, okay, yes, Pandor's a Muslim, and so you may make the case that maybe she's just siding with some quasi-religious fealty. And I see that actually quite a bit with certain individuals that are like pro-Iran. It's this like quasi-religious fealty that they don't really understand, but they're like, well, they're Muslim and we're Muslims, so must be friends. I mean, why not? So there is a degree of that. And having spoken to many of them personally, I can attest to that there is some of that stupidity. But would they send their soldiers to Iran? No ways. No ways, bud. No ways.
Sorry. So Iran's getting smacked.
We wouldn't even send our soldiers to Palestine.
Byron, what about Trump's message yesterday, or was it this morning, that if the hostages, who he thinks, and I agree, most have been murdered, raped, and killed already, they're dead. But if the hostages or their bodies are not returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, all hell will break loose. And once Trump says something publicly, he does it. So Hamas is going to get spat out of the park by 12 o'clock on Saturday. It's covered.
100%. 100%.
And good for
100%.
America. Go for
And
it. I mean, just go for it.
He told Netanyahu that basically you could, if he wanted to rip up the peace agreement, that he's like, it's fine.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll support you. Rip it up.
He's right. I mean,
so I actually got to ask you on that front. So
I
got to ask you on that front. You said you support Israel. So do you support Israel? Do you support the Jews having their own homeland?
Yes, 100%. Unequivocally. I stand by Israel. I think they have every right to flatten Hamas in whatever way possible. You know, Gayton McKenzie said it. Lesotho invaded us and took hundreds of hostages, raped, murdered, pillaged, took hundreds of hostages back. He said, I would have South Africa had every right to flatten Lesotho until we got them back. And the same applies to Israel. You know, get the job done.
Well, it doesn't, Rob, because, you know, they're like Jews and stuff. And they're like, don't you know, man? They're like evil. They're not actually, you know, they're not really, you know, terrorists, dude. They're freedom fighters, and they're fighting for the restoration of their land called Palestine. Now, interestingly enough, I don't know if you know this, in the game, I'm a huge history guy, and I know I read a lot. I like a lot. Anyway, Palestine, when it used to be called Palestine, when it was under the British rule, do you know that the Muslims refused to be called Palestinians? Because apparently the Muslims under that territory said, we're not Palestinians. Jews are Palestinians. Don't call us Palestinian, which is ironic because now that the Jews are actually called Israeli and they actually changed the name of the country, they're like, oh, we're Palestinians now. Like, who knew? So
not only is leftism mental health issues, it's just they're liars and hypocrites too. So, by the way, what book are you reading at the moment? Because I'm reading a book called both Smuts and Borsa on the one hand, but I'm also reading Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, for the third time. That's not a history book. It's a future history book. Yeah. What are you reading?
So at the moment, I'm actually reading a book on, what am I reading? I'm one of these terrible people that generally read like 3 books at once. So at the moment, I'm reading Jordan Peterson's book, which I got at Christmas, We Who Wrestle with God. I like Jordan Peterson, but you know, sometimes getting through his books are a little bit tiresome. And if I'm not reading, when I'm not reading a fiction book, I also read when I'm not reading a nonfiction book, I do read fiction, but generally I generally tend to avoid any form of written kind of fiction. I'll go for things like manga or something like that, just because I can turn my brain off a little bit. At the moment, I'm making my way through the Berserk sagas. I don't know if you doubt that's into your cup of tea, but my nonfiction at the moment is Jordan Peterson's book.
So I'm next week going, I'm in Dubai at the moment, going to London for the ARC conference, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. And Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, Constantine Kesson, Niall Ferguson, all my heroes are there. I'm hoping to meet most of them.
Oh, great. Give me an interview with Jordan. That'd be great. He won't take one because, you know, he's too important now at Daily Wire, but, you know.
And Dave Rubin.
It's actually very, very interesting. Let's go on to the very final topic, and then I'm sure you've got things to do with your very important day. So, I suppose we'll merge these into two things. The first is, I did a video this morning on Trump's offer. So Trump's obviously offered people refugee status. Although, you know, I think in my video, just to show you how South Africa tends to work on things, I mentioned that in passing it was asylum, because basically when everybody refers to this idea of going across the ponds for anything, is usually like this idea of asylum, right? But refugee status is basically pre-qualification outside of the country. Asylum is qualification in the country. You can sit there and quibble on the process, but it basically means the same thing. You both spend a year there, you get a green card, whatever. It's meant to be. You're not going back to your country because you're fleeing persecution and what. Now, Trump has obviously said that he wants the US to allow Afrikaners. I think he means whites. He hasn't really given a definition of what he means by an Afrikaner. And he hasn't said what that refugee program will actually look like. So I've got a lot of people going, oh, like, we don't know what it will look like. We don't know what his classification or his requirements are. I doubt he wants a floodgate. So he might say, if you've had expropriation done to you, maybe you should be allowed to go. I'm sure he'll put some kind of criteria in there. But what's your view on the offer?
My view is it's for any talented, dynamic South African of any shape, size, color. If you've had enough of these moronic, racist, socialist policies being forced upon you by the ANC, come to America, because we want immigrants, talented, skilled, dynamic, that believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property rights. And, if I was Australia and New Zealand, for example, instead of taking wild-ass Syrian refugees, you do allow X number of people to come in. Why not just open the floodgates to qualified South Africans? With the Australia and New Zealand, if they took 20, 30, 50, 100,000 South Africans a year instead of from other countries, their IQ would double and they'd have a chance of being Rugby World Cup champions again. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, you said that. I mean, the biggest problem that America actually has is around the B1 and the immigration visas, because anybody's ever tried to get there, like, you can get there on obviously the visa lottery, which was a lottery. But outside of that, actually getting skilled individuals going to the US is incredibly difficult, So unfortunately, if you want to do the mass wholesale kind of like theft of the people, which I would class it as the theft of the people, it's going to have to be about something like refugee status. But the reality is, do you think that it's going to be as easy as everyone thinks it is? Is he going to make it easy, or do you think it's going to be like more lip service and just a little bit of an idle threat?
I think it's lip service and an idle threat right now, but I think come the time, if South African government, which you and I both think they'll do, make the wrong decision and piss America off, I think he will open up channels for people to leave. And I think a lot of people will want to go. And it's not just Afrikaners, the culture of someone who speaks Afrikaans. It'll be, and it won't just be white. It'll be talented, people that believe in free markets and want to contribute and maybe have a skill, farming, engineering, or a degree. If I was a Ghana, for example, I would try everything possible to get skilled South Africans to come and live in my country. Aren't those the kind of people you'd want? My view.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up there with the final person. So actually, and I know you're a fan of him, so Gayton McKenzie said that some people allege that he said, fine, if whites want to go, they must go. And he basically went on into a speech and said, I never said that, and I could never say that because they're my people and I don't want my people to leave the country. Very strong position from Gaten. He's obviously been criticized by all the, people with mental illnesses, but you have an affinity to Gaten. Why? Why do you like him?
He's a right-wing politician. We need the DA are like wimpy Democrats, and Carter's nice and conservative, but Gaten is a highly intelligent believer in, free markets, rule of law, the death penalty, and he believes in libertarianism and free markets and capitalism like no one else in South Africa. And he's the one politician, in my view, that I think is a combination of Milei and Bukele and Trump. And he is exactly what South Africa needs. And more people are realizing that. You profiled him, first of all, on the morning shot, Byron. You were out there way before me. But since I met him 3.5 years ago, I realized I've met one of the most extraordinary people in South Africa, and I back him to the hills.
Yeah, Gaten, and I called it at the time, and I'll happily say it again. Gaten is a very unique leader in that there's very few leaders in South Africa that you meet that you instantly feel like, I could actually be friends with this guy. Like, he's not just a politician. I could go to his house and have a bra. Like, he's genuinely a nice guy. And, I've met a lot of politicians. I mean, John's a great example. I get on with John, and, I'm grateful he's been on my show and he's given time to talk to me and that. But would I go to John's house and bring my family? Not really. Would I do it with Gayton? In a heartbeat, bud, because he's just really approachable and he's really welcoming and very forthright. And there is a high degree of just genuineness about him. But I actually think that genuineness in some degrees goes against him, and that he's so genuine that people think like, what's the catch? There must be a catch. Like, this can't be the real face of him.
The guy is for real. And more people every day are realizing it. He is, in my view, the future of this country.
Do you think you'd ever join the PA as a candidate? Would you ever officially join them, or you?
I want to be a candidate of anything. I'm 64. I like business. I like commentating. No, I'm not good at committee meetings.
Well, you say that, but look at Ramaphosa. I mean, look at Byron. I mean, he was bloody old as hell, and he was still trying to run a country. So your age isn't but a number. I mean, these days, Rob, come on, let's be real. You could easily make it to 100 with modern technology. So
my dad's
you're in the new midlife, huh?
My dad's turning 99 this August, and he's fit as a fiddle. So I could go for a while.
Well, there you go. So you're like the new middle age. Like, come on, man. Like, venture in there, run for the country.
Politics is not for me.
A constituency.
Politics is not for me. It really isn't. I'm a businessman, and I like commentating on politics, but I'm not a politician.
Look, I think when it gets through to 2029, Gaten will be, you heard it first, but Gaten will be getting my vote. Out of all the politicians that there's out there, it's like Gaten's the most genuine one. So,
and he'll get mine.
That's just my view.
He did already.
Anyway, bud, nearly an hour, and I hate to run these things past an hour because everybody stops watching. They just get bored. So thank you so much for joining me. I had a great conversation. I hope you did too.
Keep up with what you're doing, man. It's fantastic.
I appreciate it, man. Cool.
Bye-bye.